and well, as soon as I get the nod. Well, look, I'm proposing before we start the motions, we take our maybe recess now until 4 o'clock. Would that be fair enough with people? Okay. Yeah. Happy days. Oh, please, that would be great. Thank you. Oh. Right, members, thank you. We just begin again and we're into item number 19, and that's a notice of motion. As many of you will have realised, Councillor Raymond Bauer is first on the list. The notice of motion is of a size that I have never seen before. But then and I have been informed by Teresa that she just can't get it to fit on the screen. So I take it we will all have read it, and if you need to reflect on it, you'll have to go onto your own devices to look at it. Okay. So Raymond, it's over to you.
Thank you, Mayor.
First of all, can I have a seconder, please? Can I have a second? Okay, Councillor Danway, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I've raised the issue of illegal double mobile a number of times, as have our members. And I'm sure we will all have heard the most recent news this week in relation to the potential clean-up costs. I've written to the mobile remediation project team now twice, seeking basic information about how officials had scored costs on each potential option. On the 22nd of January, I received the most recent response that outlined the remediation specialists do not require quantitative or calculated figures and estimates to complete their qualitative comparison between the various potential remediation options. So, in essence, officials are officially now informing us that they did not use any figures or data to determine how they scored the cost of each remediation option for each zone on the mobile site. It would be akin to a situation whereby we wouldn't use criteria to award funding to external organisations and simply pick successful applicants based on what we think we might know about them. That simply wouldn't happen, and it wouldn't stand up to scrutiny. As a result of an Assembly question last week, the Minister outlined for the first time that the cost of one of the options for Mobile stood at 107 million. So we have gone from low cost information to 107 million. Then during the weekend, it was revealed by the Comptroller and Auditor General that a behind the scenes disagreement on the Department's accounts had taken place over mobile clean-up costs, and that the cost of the options ranged from 17 million to 700 million. So we have now gone from 107 million to potentially 700 million. Given the importance of this issue in our city and district, I am asking now that we as a council seek answers to these important questions as listed. They are taken directly from the consultant report that outlined the criteria used to score each option. Our constituents deserve to know the background information being used to prioritise options that will ultimately lead to a remediation strategy, which the new Minister has said will be published within 2 months. We have an opportunity to ensure that the focus is brought to this and clarity is provided for all stakeholders in this area around how this has been managed by the Department. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting me in. I think it goes without saying that the ongoing situation in Maboy is one that is really very deeply concerning for all of us. Residents living within the area and further afield are just aghast at the situation and should not be having to deal with the ongoing stress and worry about their drinking water, air quality, and potential damage, or worse still, loss of our native plants and wildlife. We as a council must work closely together and be harmonious in our response on the Maboy situation. We must not be seen to be hindering any process, and I would like to put on record that our Environment and Regeneration officers have kept this as a priority matter. It's on the agenda every month. It's open for discussion and updates at every single one of our committee meetings. Whilst I do believe that we must seek answers to ensure clarity, I would also like to state that we must continue to urge the DAERA Minister to move to provide an action plan at the nearest possible avenue, and also that we as a council are seen to be fully open and transparent in our support in facilitating the actions that the Zero Minister chooses to pursue. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex?
Good chair. Having being from the area, it is a very concerning ongoing issue for the people of the Faughan DEA, and having very close to it as well. I've been involved in the campaigning and stuff for it with others for many years. So currently, as we know, DERA is responsible for the remediation, and it is in the process of formulating a strategy, as mentioned previously in our meetings and in full council. The strategy will hopefully address some of these questions raised within Councillor Barr's motion. While we agree with Councillor Barr that these questions need to be asked, and more importantly, they need to be answered, it should be us as members representing our constituents who lead this effort, and not directed by a private entity. We would prefer if these questions were directed to the individuals mentioned, inviting them to this chamber to provide answers, along with addressing any additional queries and questions. It concerns us that a private consultant is attempting to influence the decisions of this council. This matter pertains to this council, its members, and its constituents we represent, not a private entity. So I have a amendment that I've already sent to Teresa. You'd be glad to know the amendment sort of shortens it a wee bit more. Just the amendments there on your screens. If you want to read it, it's basically asking, just as I said there, that we invite those responsible to this chamber, so we can put these questions to them and any additional.
Okay, can I have a seconder for that?
Six.
Thank you. Thank you. Have any other alderman? Do you just want a wee time to look at that amendment? No, I know Alderman Nora, or no, Councillor Nora, sorry. And then you sort of put me on the fluster that I
know it's jumping ship. Not yet. Thank you, Mayor, for bringing me in. Look, since I've come onto this council, we've talked about my boy remediation. We talk about it every month in the ENR. It's a standing item. More recently, we're talking about it now, motions in full council. And I would say correctly, because it is the biggest illegal dump in Europe. And also, I'm a resident, similar to Councillor Duffy, and I've grown up beside it, and it is a big issue. But one of the first meetings I attended when I came on the council was a stakeholder meeting that DARE would have held every month or every 6 weeks or 8 weeks in Eglinton Community Hall. To me, there's only one other councillor in this room that has ever attended them. Any time I attended it, nobody else was there, and some of the councillors that have put on the motions wouldn't have been there. That was a chance to me personally, and the person that put the motion, to be able to give that personally to the people who was there. That was a perfect avenue to give all their questions when they were there in the room, and all the engineers were there. So that's one point. Another point would be, I have no issues asking questions to there, but like, council officers are committed, at my point, to the remediation process, and I've brought report after report which supports this. Last month, we as councillors supported a recommendation to employ an expert to study the department's remediation strategy once it's published, and that's the key. We need the minister to publish this and get on with life. And that would provide us with the support. It's time councillors recommit to the position and stop causing distraction. to an already agreed council position. And that's my point. Thank you.
Any others? Councillor Gallagher?
Thank you. Well, I don't have any problems with the amendment. But what I would say is, that the questions being included, and it would be good that before they come before council, that they would provide us with possible answers to those questions. And then we can be in a position to probably question them a whole lot better. And what I would say just to all the previous speakers, like, this is an issue that's been going on for a very long time. And I don't think that you should be shooting the messenger. This has been a long problem for many years and will continue to be one, because I don't see 700 million coming to the table anytime soon. But it's the people, particularly that live within that area. And there's also issues around, for example, the road and the rivers that have the potential to be seriously polluted and not getting a finish on the A6. So there's a lot of problems for this council into the future. So it's about remediation, not about who's bringing the message. Thank you.
Councillor Harkin?
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, my boy is a scandal. We all know that. And now that Stormont is restored, there'll be expectations that we can move forward with getting it addressed. I think that the amounts that we're talking about in terms of what it's going to take to remediate it, whether it's 100 million, 700 million, are terrifying given all the other financial pressures on us. And I think that the slowness of action is frustrating people and obviously allowing the situation that my boy to deteriorate as well. Councillor Donnelly there was mentioning earlier that there's increased fly tipping and around the area, and it doesn't seem to be getting properly monitored. So I think the more questions, the better, and because people want answers. And I think if this motion helps to put a spotlight on my boy, because it can get lost because there's so many different problems facing us right now. But that, part of the problem is that we're looking to government departments here who actually are responsible for the mess in the first place to sort it all out. And I think as a councillor and a council and councillors, we have to be, seeking answers, seeking clarity, and putting as much pressure on anybody that can help to move this forward. So I think that that's what the intent is here with this motion.
Okay, I have no more indicated speakers and we have an amendment. So I take it everybody is in agreement with the amendment? Yeah. So I'm going to go back to you, Councillor Barr, for summing up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no problem with the amendment. The department's had a long time to come up with a solution to this problem and have failed to do so. I've asked before, can we as a council not basically put an ad in the local press inviting expressions of interest from the private sector with a view to carrying out remedial work? And I can't for the life of me see why anybody would have a problem with it. Thank you.
So again, I'm just going to take it that we're all in agreement with the motion. Yes. Okay, there we go. So moving on now to motion item number 2, and it's a joint motion by Councillor McKinley and Councillor Hutton, and I believe Councillor. Oh,
I've skipped the page, haven't I?
oh.
Yeah.
So sorry, I didn't see that at the end of that. So Councillor Duffy.
Gurmugget, Mayor. Thanks for not messing me out. Yeah. Okay. Mayor, I'm just going to speak to the motion if that's okay. So the motion is there, and definitely your health is your wealth. But unfortunately, and all too often call we're receiving in our constituency offices is from people who are on increasingly long waiting lists for hip or knee replacements, cataract removals, even cardiac services. People who are in absolutely severe pain, elderly people who have been told that even though they're in chronic pain, that they will have to wait up to 7 years for the fatal surgery that will give them some ease. A fear that they are losing who they are and their independence as their sight slowly deteriorates as they wait up to 5 years for cataract removals. Whilst the health service is facing many difficulties and challenges, this is one challenge that could have been avoided. This is again the outworking of a disastrous Brexit where people in the north have been unfairly disadvantaged against their will. People have been forced to live in pain and with sight loss to appease a Tory DUP agenda. The EU Cross-Border Healthcare Directive closed on the 31st of December 2020 as Brexit took hold. And then in June 2021, the Health Minister, Robin Swan, faced of growing waiting lists, opened another temporary scheme to mitigate against the impact of this closure. This was most welcome and helped to address some of the long waiting lists. This scheme managed to assist almost 3,500 patients across the north, with 708 of those coming from the Western Trust area. Unfortunately, this scheme also closed in September 2022, leaving far too many of our residents languishing on waiting lists for elective surgery, with their health needs deteriorating and becoming more and more complex and life-changing. It is imperative that if we again impress upon the Health Minister the importance of reopening the scheme. I have one case with an elderly gentleman. He is in his late 70s and requires a hip replacement. He is in chronic pain and has been told that he will have to wait 7 years for surgery. This is causing him to all but give up on life as he sees no future for himself. It is a heartbreaking situation. It is heartbreaking for his family to watch their father in pain. It is heartbreaking for them to see him give up, when in all reality, he is in good health apart from his hip and should be enjoying life rather than living in pain. I call on the Health Minister to urgently reopen this scheme and give people back hope, give them back their lives and give them back a pain-free, independent existence and give them the invaluable gift of their health. Gurmugga.
Thank you, Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a slight amendment, just a wee addition to it, please. Okay. So thank you to Councillor, are you right for me to go on ahead? Thank you to Councillor Duffy for bringing this motion. I think it's right that it's brought now. Sorry.
Sorry, just for Teresa's, it has been seconded by
Aye.
Councillor Tierney. Okay, thank you.
Okay, right. Okay, so thanks to Councillor Duffy for bringing the motion. I think it's right that it's brought now. Reducing waiting lists to be a top priority for the executive now that it's been reformed. I mean, Sandra, you've already went through a lot of the details, but 1 in 3 people in North of Ireland are on a waiting list, not for the hospital. It's completely unacceptable. My mommy's on a waiting list for surgery for almost 6 years. And when you think about in those 6 years, how many more people have been added to that list, how many people have been living in pain, being cared for by their families that are now becoming burnt out with fatigue, cares fatigue, how many people have died while sitting on a waiting list for surgery that could have reduced their pain, taken away their pain and improved their quality of life. It's just not acceptable. And there's a number of reasons that our health service is in such a bad state. And we'll not go into it here today. We all know that staff retention is a problem. We all know funding strategies need to be improved. We know we need more domiciliary care packages. We know there's loads of things that needs to be done to address the things that are bad in our health service. The COVID pandemic knocked every aspect of it. Waiting lists got longer and staff worked harder than ever and as a result have burnt out. But let's face it, the health service wasn't in a good position before that. The fact that we've had no health minister in place for 5 of the past 7 years hasn't helped. No minister in place to deliver a realistic, fully funded action plan with tangible goals that are regularly monitored and held to account. When the Cross-Border Healthcare Directive was in place before, hundreds, if not thousands of people accessed it, been able to get the care they required and reduce the waiting lists at the same time. We need to make sure that all citizens here are able to access it. In October of last year, the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly met to discuss protecting the common travel area, and one issue that was highlighted was the current immigration legislation. It discussed at length the invisible border here on the island of Ireland and the impact that has on visa nationals settled here in Northern Ireland. The example discussed it's just amendment to the motion. I was glad to see a motion recently brought to the executive as well, called Health Minister to publish an updated action plan to tackle health waiting lists within 6 weeks. The SDLP MLA Colin McGrath actually tabled amendment to that motion to include the immediate reinstatement of the cross-border healthcare directive, and this motion was passed unanimously within the Stormont Chamber. It's great to see that Councillor Duffy has brought this motion to our council, and we're more than happy to support it. I think we need to be coming at this from every level in order to provide a health service that's fit for purpose for the citizens here. So hopefully within the next 6 weeks, we'll see a realistic, fully funded action plan that will improve our health service as a whole and have a sustainable and lasting impact. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman Cook.
Thanks, Mayor, for letting me in, and thanks to Councillor Duffy for bringing the motion forward. So high waiting times are deepening in Northern Ireland's health inequalities. New figures show growth in our hospital waiting times. People are stressed and quite frankly fed up waiting years for their treatments, appointments, surgeries, whatever it may be. An increasing number are now choosing to self-fund private healthcare due to these long waits, and Northern Ireland's patient population shouldn't be in a position where some can afford to pay for treatment and others who can't. Reopening the cross-border healthcare and any other recommendation is welcomed, and we fully support it, as long as it is cost-effective and can help the strain in our hospitals. Me and my party colleagues feel that our health minister needs to fully invest in their own health service to ensure that our hospitals are staffed appropriately to allow for these waiting times to decrease. This needs to be addressed now before it gets any worse and we are left with a two-tiered system for those who can pay and for those who can't. Thank you.
Councillor Harkin.
Hi, Mayor. Happy to support the motion and the amendment, and thank you to Councillor Duffy for bringing it forward, and for the Councillor McDade for the amendment. I think, look, it's been disappointing to hear the Health Minister swan already managing people's expectations about what can be done in relation to the waiting lists. He's basically saying that it's going to be near impossible to get them down significantly over the next couple of years. And that's disappointing when, you know, so much fanfare was generated about getting Stormont back up to deal with waiting lists and to do, you know, to save our health service. So we fully back the idea that that we should have that the cross-border healthcare directive should be funded and reopened as soon as possible. People need to be able to access healthcare. There's also another dimension to this, which is that, look, the crisis in the health service isn't accidental. It's been engineered in order to promote privatisation, and that is happening in the north. It's happened a lot in the south already, and people don't say that this is what they're for, because privatisation of the health service and the running down of the NHS isn't a popular thing to be for, but that again, that is what's happening by stealth here. So look, I think what we actually need, in addition to this motion, is we need an all-Ireland national health service that is properly funded, that can meet people's needs from the cradle to the grave. I think that the crisis in our health service in the north, and basically an admittance by this minister that Stormont right now is not actually going to be able to fix the problem, points in the direction of you know, the urgency of actually creating an all-Ireland healthcare system. So we fully support the motion, but we actually need there is only one solution to this, and that's going to be through an all-Ireland a national health service.
I think that's the first time it happened that the councillors actually stopped at the actual time that you're allowed. Amazing.
Thank you, Mayor.
There's a whole lot of firsts in here today. I think.
Can I get a legal opinion on that?
Well, so we have an amendment on the floor, which I think everybody is okay with, from I can hear in my end anyway. Yeah. So I'm going to hand over now to Sandra again to sum up. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor, and thank you to everyone who contributed to the debate, and thank you to Catherine for the amendment. I'm more than happy to see it as an addition to the original motion. I think in terms of the motion, we know that our health service is broken north and south. I completely agree with Councillor Harkin. That's another first maybe. in terms of our solution needs to be looking at a health service on an all-island basis. I think that we are working at the minute in two jurisdictions where a small island with the population that we have and with limited resources that we have, we are much better off in many ways, not just in health, as looking at these things in an all island context. And I think that health certainly is one of those. I think that in terms of here in the Northwest, we're seeing talk of a new orthopedic centre opening in Sligo. That is really good news for the Northwest and particularly for us as a Northwest City region. I think that those possibilities are all open to us, and I think those options need to be all on the table. But right here in the here and now, we have too many people who are in pain and who are on waiting lists. We need to be doing everything that we can. I was disappointed yesterday by the Health Minister's statement with regard to waiting lists, and I think that much more pressure needs to be put on him to deliver for people here. But my ultimate solution is an all-Ireland health service. That is what the people need, and it's what the people deserve, to ensure that we're not sitting with two broken systems and we have one system that actually serves the people as they deserve. Thank you.
So again, folks, I think that doesn't need to go to a vote. So, okay. Are we okay? Sorry, did you want to come in? I'm so sorry, I hadn't. I'm sorry. Okay, so I take it that everybody's in agreement with the full motion. So we're now moving on to Councillor McGinley and Councillor Hutton. It's motion, joint motion, and I believe, Aisling, you're going to take this. Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll just speak to the motion now. I'll take it as read. So back in October 2023, myself and Councillor McGinley were invited to a pizza and politics evening organised by FUN, which took place up in Hollywell. And arising from that meeting, there was residents from across the Moor Ward invited, and we talked about many, many topics. One in particular came up from residents from the Fountain area in relation to the derelict buildings that exist there at the minute and that are causing an extreme health and safety hazard to the residents there and anybody that's using the fountain as a sort of walkway through under the city centre. So we decided to do a walkabout with one of the residents up there and discovered that there were quite a few buildings that were derelict, that were owned by housing executive and also owned by private ownership. Some of them had been caged off with a view to keeping them safe, but in our opinion, they weren't safe at all. In particular, one of the buildings had no windows, and there was a gentleman found sleeping within there, and we had to make a referral that day to First Housing to have an emergency responder come out to him. So that's where this motion has come from upon consultation with the residents. I was then invited to the Peace Walls Forum, which is a group made up of residents, community workers, local colleges. I was the only sort of political representative there, and I went along to update the residents and the actual community organisations that exist within the fountain. They welcomed this motion and they said that they were delighted that something was actually being done about it now. So that is why the motion has been brought here today. I feel that it's important that these people are listened to. They're a very valued community within the Moor DEA, particularly because of the good relations work that the school up there is doing with other schools in the area through shared education. The youth clubs work together, and indeed the community organisations work very well together, particularly the Triax Neighbourhood Management Team, who are going to be working alongside us in relation to solving these dereliction problems. Now, I think that this problem does go beyond the fountain. We can envisage this sort of motions like this being brought forward in relation to other areas in the city. But at the minute, due to the health and safety risks that are up there with regards to these derelict buildings, I would appreciate supporting this motion to form this task force so that we can get to work and start making this community safer, clean, and an environment where people are proud to live in. Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman McMorris.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Councillors Hutton and McGinley for bringing this motion forward today. I particularly was unaware that derelict buildings were the role and responsibility of council, but on the basis of the motion brought forward, I feel that this should not only be inclusive of the fountain, but also all derelict properties within the city and district. Many buildings which are privately owned are left in a state of disrepair, and often they become unsafe and unsightly. I personally have been living opposite a residential property which has been derelict for nearly 30 years. There is nothing I would love more than to see this property being restored with a family moving in and making it their forever home. We currently have dilapidated properties scattered all over our city and district. On the main arterial route from Londonderry to Strabane, there is many derelict buildings going through the village of New Buildings. And on the waterside, Spencer Road, Clooney Terrace, Everton Terrace have all got derelict buildings. And these are on prominent sites leading into our city, which is not the positive image that we want to create for visitors or residents. Our beautiful rural countryside also sees its fair share of derelict residential properties, as well as properties of a historical interest, which will be lost to the future generations if they aren't restored. In regards to the fountain, which Councillors Hutton and McGinley have brought a motion forward today on, they have many derelict residential and commercial properties. This estate, due to its city centre location and its historical history, has many residents, visitors and workers parking and visiting there on a daily basis. This area should be vibrant, and with all the recent investment into the area, it should be a place where the community is proud of and are able to showcase. Instead, for whatever reason, property owners are not fixing and maintaining their properties so that they can be rented or sold to families who need somewhere to live. We are all aware of the housing crisis, not only in our city and district, but all over Northern Ireland. If all the derelict properties were restored, this would go a long way to alleviating homelessness for a lot of families. Mayor, we currently have a task force set up helping to support the property owners of Austin's of the Diamond, hoping to oversee the saving and restoration of this iconic building. Therefore, I feel it would be more prudent, rather than setting up individual task force group to oversee derelict buildings in an individual area, we have one task force prioritising and dealing with all these buildings going forward, with the fountain being the first to be addressed. If this can't be added to the Austin's task force, I propose an amendment to the original motion to set up a task force to address the issues being experienced by the communities in our city and district as a result of buildings being left derelict and in an unsafe state. And I've emailed Teresa.
Have you a seconder for that, please? Thank you. Alderman Cook, seconder, Teresa. Folks, Alderman McMorris, I've just been advised that that is not an acceptable amendment due to the scope of the motion that we put forward, and given how this would considerably add to the motion. if you want maybe the city solicitor to explain that in wee bit more detail, I'm happy to let that happen.
Members, there has been reference made to the Austin's task force. And members may recall that whenever that proposal was brought forward, there was an amendment proposed to that motion that it would extend to other buildings as well as Austin. And that amendment was rejected because it increased the scope of the notice of motion and placed an additional burden on the council as a result of it. This amendment would fall foul of the same position. So I'm afraid the proposal will have to stay addressing the fountain at the present time, and then when that's dealt with, then members can look at an alternative proposal at some stage in the future, but it can't be dealt with as an amendment to this proposal.
Are you okay with that? You're happy enough to withdraw? Okay, Alderman Guy.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Councillor McGinley and Alton for bringing this notice of motion. I would have to say that I did agree with the amendment there, but obviously understand why it can't be put in, which is why I'm going to say what I'm going to say about this here. It's my understanding that the Martin brothers already have plans in place for Hawkins Street, and I think they do own some of the properties in Wapping Lane and have put in place plans for that. So, to be honest, when we look at the just released mirror strategy, has nothing in it on tackling dereliction in the fountain, even though this was #1 priority for urban villages at the time. And that seems to have gone awry as well. The pressure of dealing with this dereliction needs to be applied to urban villages and not millions pressure added to the council budget. Was there not talk of a £2 million public realm scheme for the fountain? And where's it gone? We haven't heard any more talk about it. £45 million pumped into the Triax area, with peanuts given to the fountain to keep them on site. Council doesn't need to get involved in this and be in the solution. We could never afford it, but we should be putting pressure on those in urban villages before they decide to up sticks and walk away from this, from what they says that they would sort out in the first place. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Guy. I have a number of speakers waiting, but you did mention a few figures there, 45 million for the bauxite and 2 million public realm. Am I taking you're referring to the urban villages money? Yeah, both in both cases. Yeah. The 2 million public realm as urban villages in the previous council. Right. Right, okay. I can only speak and just regarding the 2 million because I actually sit on that working group. I sit in Urban Villages Committee, and I just want to say that the fountain is very, very much involved within that programme. So they will be part of the spend regarding the 2 million. Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, Mayor, for that there. That urban villages would, let's say, take their foot off the, if they're what they are planning to do, that if they see council coming on top of it, they may just take a step away from it.
Can I just assure you that I sit in that committee and I will not be a lawyer?
I know you do.
Urban villages
I know you do.
take their foot off the pedal. Thank you very much.
I trust that you will keep that foot down on them.
Mm-hmm. So, Councillor, Councillor Money.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to come on the basis that they thank Councillors McGinley and Hutton bringing this motion. We debated a similar type motion, the one I brought about 2 years ago, the Dunfield Terrace, really on the same basis that there was dereliction and empty houses, and just to say the council has experience in dealing with this. had a summer type meeting of all the statutory authorities, and if I can remember, it was Councillor Jackson chaired the meeting on it shortly thereafter. But really one of the reflections I found that you probably might find is that the legislation as it stands is a very, very narrow scope and limited to derelict houses as they stand. You find that most of the duties just lie upon the owners of the properties, and unfortunately to this day we still find that with Dunfield Terrace that it hasn't really moved on, except because even though we had the fire there and things like that there, unless it's dangerous, it's only time really the council or even the DFI or statute bodies can come in and do something about it. So if I would probably one ask I would have is if you are having meetings about this, and I hope the best luck to you about that would be if there was any scope of, and meetings with councillors to see if there's any ways you could, reflect on going to Stormont and asking for maybe more wider or even like a reflection on the laws and expand the laws that would impose stronger duties on householders, because at the end of the day, if you own the property and it's lying derelict, it's your property and you should pick up the tab for it or pick up the responsibility. And that's what we found as a sort of learning from Dunfield Terrace and one of the things. But I wish you well in your motion, and I hope you get a bit of joy out of it anyway. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor McGinley.
Mega Chair, and thank you for the comments that have been made so far. In relation to this motion, as Councillor Hutton outlined, this has come out of engagements that we've been having with residents there since October. At no point are we asking the council to pay to fix derelict buildings. Alderman Gay, just to clear that up, the purpose of the motion is as what happened with the task force that was set up to tackle the issues in Glenowen. The council has been coordinating those meetings and highlighting the importance of getting all the relevant stakeholders around the table so that we can tackle the issue. And that's the role that we want council to play in it. Council has that experience, and as I say, we've been doing that within the task force that's been set up for Glenowen. So we think it's a positive model of trying to tackle these issues. As Councillor Hutton outlined, we did a walk around to the fountain. They're a very proud community. And aside from that main thoroughfare and where these derelict buildings is, it's a very, very well kept area. Very, very proud of where they're from. And nobody is trying to take that away from the residents within the fountain or their community groups or the work that does go on within the fountain. But this is coming from a health and safety perspective. Some of these buildings, there's pebble dashing falling off the fronts of the buildings. As Councillor Hutton outlined, there was one of them where there was a vulnerable individual that was sleeping within an abandoned building, and that's not good enough in any community. But the residents in the fountain have approached us, and we are wanting to take action on this on their behalf. And the task force itself, we want it to be open to elected members from across all political backgrounds, the community organisations, the community workers, the schools, the statutory bodies, the housing executive have a role to play, as they've done in other areas. But the tab for derelict buildings falls with the people that own them, but we need to get them at the table, find out what their plans are and what they're planning to do to address the issue of their derelict buildings that they seem to have abandoned. So in that vein, I would ask people to support this. We're not saying that this stops with a fountain, but it needs to start with a fountain. And that's why the focus of this motion is on the fountain and not every derelict building that exists in the City District. Thank you.
Christopher.
Mayor, and just briefly in response to some of the comments that was relating to the Spencer Road and the adjacent areas. I know I've had meetings with the housing executive about derelict properties, particularly and identified quite a few. We did a walk around with representatives from the housing executive, and I think it's important that the housing executives contained within this motion, because the housing executive were able to find solutions. I know there was particular properties in Barnwell Place that roofs had collapsed that posed health and safety concerns. The residents living nearby, and because of the city centre location, the housing executive were able to take an initiative to bring those properties back into use and address the health and safety concerns. So there's, I think, and I know in particular in that piece of work, there was other properties identified in Guardfoyle Place and Dungiven Road and Lower Violet Street. But there's, in this one, and with the exact same health and safety concerns, there's an opportunity here for council to play a coordinating role to identify the issues that are relating to the fighting in particular, and that could potentially spread out to include residential properties right across it that are adjacent to the city centre, and avail of the focus or tie into that focus that the housing executive have in relation to supporting the city centre. So there's again, like the two previous speakers, I would urge people they not move away from the focus and not move away from the genuine concerns that have been raised as part of this motion, and accept that there's people contained within this that could be part of this task force that could bring potential solutions, and council have an important role, I suppose, in relation to coordinating that and bringing people together. So it's not going to end at the fountain, but let's start off with a focus on those particular properties. Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, just within this particular area, I think there's been a lot of work done with the Northwest Development Office on this, and somebody mentioned it there, urban villages. So I think maybe we would need to check out, around duplication of work and what's going on. But before council goes in, I think that I would tend to agree with Alderman McMorris and the setting up of a task group that looks across the district. And I know that the legal opinion is saying this puts more onus on this particular motion. But I think what council and corporate council must also bear in mind that council needs to provide equality of opportunity across the district. And why I say that is that it was me that brought the motion that I think that Philip was talking about, that there's not a street in Strabane town that you will walk around that there is not derelict buildings. And if this council decides to put up a task group or task force about a particular area, then I think in all duty that the council is not providing equality of opportunity. And I think that if we look at the resources that the council has, and it's got limited resources, as we all know when it came to the rates. And when we talk about putting up the rates at a hike, and we talk about equality of service, then I think we need to be providing a service where this council knows, in particular this motion, that there is derelict buildings within Strabane town that need to be brought back in, that supports the local community, it supports the local business sector, and we don't start carving up where a task group is going to work within this district. Thank you, Mayor. So on this, I'll be abstaining on this particular motion.
Okay, Councillor Boyd.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you very much, Mayor. I'm going to nail the SDLP colours to the mast in relation to this. Obviously, we've had the legal opinion. The legal opinion is something very similar to what we heard before. I personally, as I'm sure everybody in the chamber will remember, brought the motion that Councillor McGinley referred to in relation to Glen Owen. That task force is actually working very well. It's not finished its business at this point. I understand and appreciate all of the arguments that the likes of Councillor Gallagher have presented here today. However, what we're looking at here, Mayor, is a motion which is fairly straightforward in the sense that it is asking for us to set up a task force. Others have also referenced the fact that these are opportunities to have conversations between elected members, council officers, the housing executive, all other relevant departments, and the building owners. And as I understand it, and I appreciate there are many streets probably right across the city and district that we could pick out, but the current situation, as referenced on the fountain, is one that does need to be looked at and addressed as a matter of urgency. So we are supporting the motion. If there's further motions come forward in relation to that wider topic, then of course we in the SDLP will look at that and consider it. But that's not the motion in front of us right now. This is the motion in front of us, and this is a motion we in the SDLP will be supporting. And it's unfortunate that there's been people arguing over where money goes and various other bits and pieces. But let's just deal with the motion that's in front of us, Mayor. And I'm not telling you how to do your job. We're happy with this motion. We're supporting this motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, I'm really, really glad you're not telling me how to do my job. John,
I would never dare to
that
do
would
that.
just be unthinkable, wouldn't it?
I would absolutely not.
Anyway, Councillor Donnelly.
Chair. Look, on paper, I have no issue with the motion, particularly following the sort of clarification from Emma, from Councillor McKinley, involved in the Glenone task force and that. But there is, and I accept that, and I hope to be part of that, but there is confusion amongst some people within the fountain, and obviously some people, and there's difference of opinions within the chamber. And there was a meeting in 2015 of Urban Village, which was attended by senior council officials, the manager of the Housing Executive, Fountain Forum, Triax, Peace Walls Project, Cathedral Youth Club, Triax, Gashard Development Trust, Triax Strategy Manager, Urban Villages, and Northwest Development Office. And at that meeting in 2015, it did state that the top priorities and strategy, and at the top of that very list, was to tackle dereliction, in brackets, particularly in the fountain area. And I know that there is some people in the fountain that thinks that hasn't, that's Urban Villages is tasked with that, and is there duplication. They also, some of the points that was mentioned earlier about that there is and like many communities who are diverse and there's inter-community, differences and differences of opinions, but there's also thinking within the fountain that they were naive regarding that the fountain was central to the funding coming, and that they were basically, that it would be fair and equitable, and that they were swallowed up in that, and a lot of the fountain a lot of the money went disproportionately to our areas. And the way they describe it is that the fountain area has many false dawns and promises. But look, if this is done in the same sort of light as the Glenone, then absolutely no problems with this, and it may be a welcome opportunity for many different opinions within the fountain to come and present their case or put their opinions in a forum like that. Where I have from my personal sort of opinions now is that there is some landlords, huge landlords, in my opinion, let's put it very mildly, they're unreputable, and I certainly wouldn't be thinking that this council should be given in any way. And I'm not saying suggested, but there could be an opinion. It could be an opinion could be formulated about that we don't need to be giving them people a leg up in any way. And if there is landlords out there, or they're private or domestic, if they're not looking after their properties, the onus is on them. It's not up the and I know, and I'm not saying that this is being suggested, but they need to be looking after their own stuff. They need to be looking after, they've bought properties in the fountain and they're absentee landlords. They're the people who need to step up to the mark and sort this out. I'm uneasy about the whole Austin's things. Is it favourable treatment? They certain people or organisations or business people. But by and large, I'm going to support the motion, and I look forward to that type of environment where people can get round the table and have an open and frank and honest conversation. So happy to support the motion. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to back to Aisling now to sum up. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Now, just briefly, for the same reasons as outlined by Councillor Gallagher there in relation to equity, I'd feel no option, but I would have to abstain as well. I don't think we can have a focus on one part of the council district where the same problem is as bad, if not worse, than another part. Thank you, Mayor.
Alderman McMorris.
Thanks for letting me in again. Just for clarity, we support the motion. The reason why I brought back the amendment is because I do see that as an issue right across the city and district. And I'm just conscious that, you know, we set up a task force for Austins and there's one for Glenorchy and whatever. I was just conscious of people's diaries and times. So like it's just multiple meetings about the same issue. And we'll be talking to the same statutory agencies, you know, and in regards to it, like one meeting talking about the same, because the opinions is going to be the same, whether it be Irish Street, the Fountain, the Bogside, Craigan. It'll be, so that's why I brought the amendment forward. I didn't realise that the legal opinion put it to my naivety, but I just want to say we're supporting the motion, but that's why we brought the comments we did.
Aisling, I'm going to hand it over to yourself now to sum up.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thanks everybody for your input under the conversation. I suppose that's what we're all here for, to discuss and debate and see the best way forward. And I suppose the learning from the Glenorchy Task Force was what prompted myself and Councillor McGinley to ask for this task force. I'm a believer in not biting off more than you can chew and taking things piece by piece, rather than going straight into this and having to look at it citywide, which would be a massive piece of work. It's about breaking it down, but keeping in our minds that we also have other work to do in relation to dereliction. But due to the health and safety standards in the Fountain at the minute, we just felt that this was urgent. We did the walkabout. You're free to go up and walk about it yourselves and see what we witnessed, because it is an urgent matter. We saw pebble dash falling from the walls, a man sleeping in a house. I could go on. So in relation to the monies that has been chatted about being invested in the triacs and particularly the Fountain area, there has been massive improvement up there with the new Gate Arts Theatre, and a beautiful building that's going to be providing arts and culture or events to the whole city. And I think as well where that's situated, some of the dereliction is around it, and it doesn't look very well when you're coming in under the theatre if you're coming out of the city. So, and we're talking about equality too, Councillor Gallagher. I work off equality. This isn't me just picking one area and saying this is what I want to deal with. This is a first step, and they're looking at this across the city, because everywhere I go or I drive now, the derelict buildings are jumping out at you because you're noticing them more. So I just wanted to make that point as well. But Councillor or Alderman McMorris mentioned about meetings. We have a serious housing crisis in this city, and if renewing and working with agencies and private ownership to renew derelict housing is going to give us a wee bit of leeway there, we will go to numerous meetings a week if we have to. So I'll thank everybody for supporting the motion, and just to reiterate, this is a first step. We know there's a bigger task at hand, but at the minute the community reached out, we responded, and we need to sort out the health and safety issues in the Fountain. Thank you.
Okay, Alderman Guy, I know you indicated there, but I cannot let you come in. It's just that the motion has now passed the comment stage and questions, and summing up has.
Mayor, can I ask about the microphone again? Sorry, I really apologise. Darren, can you put on your microphone?
It was just to ask Philip a question in relation to this. Nothing like we're supporting the motion, but I just wanted to ask a question, and I'm permitted to go ahead, Mayor. it's not non-controversial. It's,
Go ahead. I'm being very good today, aren't I?
thank you, Mayor.
Go
Thank you,
ahead.
Mayor. And I know what Alderman McMorris came in there with and Councillor Gallagher. And I know what you are saying about just taking an area by a time, at each time. But is there something that maybe like we could do domestic and non-domestic? Is that a way around it? Just a quick question, just for answer there, Philip.
So, Mayor, the easiest way to answer that question is that all notices of motion that come before this council are considered by officers after the meeting. In many cases, those motions result in further paper being brought forward to advise members in relation to other options in relation to it. Also, members will consider matters within a working group which may make certain input towards officers, which will result in further consideration and further papers in due course. As somebody has said, earlier on today, we're dealing with the motion that's in front of us here today, and that's what will be voted on. But other courses of action in due course may well be considered by officers and may result in a paper.
Okay, members, now I did hear a difference of opinion here, so I'm going to ask John to take it to the vote. Thank you.
Alderman Cook,
For.
Alderman Guy, Alderman Hussey,
Or.
Alderman Carrigan,
For.
Alderman McMorris,
Or.
Alderman Middleton,
Or.
Alderman Montgomery,
Or.
Alderman Wilkinson,
Or.
Councillor Jason Barr, Councillor Lillian Barr, Councillor Raymond Barr,
Abstain.
Councillor Boggs,
Or.
For. Is that for?
Councillor Boyle,
Or.
Councillor Clark,
Ta.
Councillor Cusick,
Or.
Councillor Deany,
Ta.
Councillor Devine,
Ta.
Councillor Donnelly,
Or.
Councillor Alex Duffy, Councillor Sandra Duffy,
Ta.
Councillor Farrell,
Or.
Councillor Fleming,
Ah.
Councillor Gallagher,
Abstain.
Councillor Harkin,
Or.
Councillor Hart, Councillor Heaney, Councillor Hutton,
Ta.
Councillor Jackson, Councillor Leonard,
Ta.
Councillor Logue,
For.
Councillor McDade,
Or.
Councillor McGinley,
Ta.
Councillor McHugh, Councillor Mooney,
Or.
Councillor Murphy, Councillor Norris,
Or.
Councillor O'Farrell, Councillor Riley,
For.
Councillor Tierney, Councillor Nealis.
Ta.
Thank you, members. Mayor recorded 37 for, none against, and 2 abstentions.
Thank you. Okay, going to move on now. Councillor Harkin.
Thank you, Mayor. Take the motion as read.
Yeah, have you a seconder there? Yeah, Councillor Barr, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barr. Look, the fact that we have 50,000 people, 50,000 applicants on the social housing waiting list will not be news to people across this chamber. And the fact that we in Derry have the highest number of applicants at now in the region of 6,000 will not be news either to councillors or aldermen. And we have used the term crisis now for a long time to describe the situation with housing. And it is a crisis. And it's probably more of a hidden crisis because we don't have large numbers of people sleeping homeless in the streets. But if you talk to anybody that's part of frontline services, anybody that works for a housing association or the housing executive, they will tell you about the degree and the scale of homelessness across our district and across the north. So now that this executive has been restored, I think we have to have demands on the executive to address the housing crisis. And I think that those, it needs to be a priority and there needs to be urgent action. And we have heard a lot from different people with expertise in social housing and in housing more generally over the last 6 months. We've heard from different representatives from the DFC, from the Housing Supply Unit, from the Social Housing Department about the scale of the crisis. And we've heard again and again from them about how stretched they are and about how much they're in dire straits, and about the fact that the plans that the DFC and the executive now have for house building are inadequate. And even though there's been significant social housing building in Derry in particular over the last couple of years, we've heard again and again that it's not actually going to put a proper dent into the number of people who are homeless or who are on the housing waiting list. And I think that we have to figure out a way to make this an absolute priority for the executive. And I think as a council, we need a lead in that. I also think that we need to raise the alarm because, look, I look to what's happening in different places across the south, and I'm very worried about it. And I think a lot of people are, where you have people running around shouting Ireland is full, even though there are 180,000 empty properties across the south that could be where homes could be created. But you have migrants and refugees bearing the brunt now for people's anger about the lack of housing or the lack of affordable housing. And that's not happening just down in Dublin. That's happening in places like Buncrana, where we have people harassing migrants on the streets. And I don't want that to come here. But I think that there are people who I would say are far right agitators who are trying to work on people's grievances about their inability to get a house, or about how the waiting list works, or about how points works, in order to create the impression that you're not getting because it's a migrant that's getting home. And I think if we want to block that from happening, we actually have to build more houses. We need more social homes. We need more houses that are affordable, because it's not just that there's not enough social houses, there's not enough houses available for rent. So I think we have to say to the department, the DFC in particular, that the plans right now are not adequate. I think we need to have targets that the council comes up with. I think at least 1,000 a year social housing builds is
Or just,
the
can you wind up now?
I'll wind up now, Mayor.
Just broken that record you made, so we're way over, so.
We need a big clock up there on the wall, a timer. But I think a baseline of at least 1,000 houses built across the district a year, and a commitment to do that on a multi-year basis, is the only way that we're going to put a proper dent in the waiting list numbers. I think the previous discussion about addressing the fact that we've got 1,500 empty houses across the district, now that Stormont's up, there can be legislation brought in to actually start turning them into homes for people. So I think this is a call for action. It's also to raise the alarm, to not allow people who are vulnerable to be scapegoated for a problem that government created.
Thank you. And Councillor Farrell.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to Councillor Harkin for the proposal. We're in the midst of a housing crisis, and everybody in this chamber knows it. The housing executive know it. The housing associations know it. The Department for Communities know it. But there's 6,000 people right across the city and district who are on the waiting list, who are fighting for points every day, who are patiently waiting for offers, that definitely know there's a housing crisis across this city and district. And the fact of the matter is, not enough houses are being built. And regardless of the number of new builds that are built on an annual basis, the list continues to grow and grow. Regardless of the calculations behind the housing needs analysis, the list continues to grow and grow. And regardless of the ambition of the current housing supply strategy, the list will continue to grow and grow. And the reason is money. There's not enough money being invested in social housing across the entire north. We're in the middle of a housing crisis, and the budget for social housing has been cut. The current budget isn't enough to put a dent in the housing waiting list, and it's certainly not enough to build the number of houses the scale of houses that we need to tackle this problem across our city and district. We support Councillor Harkin's motion. We do have a slight amendment, well, 2 amendments, in fact. And let's say it's 1 amendment, Councillor Gallagher, but it's multifaceted.
Councillor, it can only be 1 amendment now.
But it is 1 amendment.
Yeah, okay.
We are amending it once. So in terms of the vision to build 1,000 social homes per year across the city and district, it's ambitious, but we support it. We think there needs to be something in there about finance, because at governance, we had members from the Department for Communities Housing Supply Strategy, and they told us that the current budget for social housing across the north was cut to £159 million for this year. And with the £159 million, they could build 1,500 houses. So to build 1,000 houses in this city and district would cost £106 million, which would leave £53 million for the rest of the north. So I don't think anybody outside Derry and Strabane would be too happy with us taking up 2/3 of the budget. So we think that there needs to be ring fence funding from the executive to comprehensively address the housing crisis across the city and district. In terms of empty homes, yeah, Councillor Lillian Barr previously had a motion calling for the implementation.
Councillor, you're going way over your speaking time, and I mean really way over.
But I'm speaking to the amendment now.
Well, I know that.
But Councillor Barr is going to come in and speak about the empty home strategy. And in terms of the member-led housing crisis task force, we agree with that. We think it should be open to all members because it is something that every councillor is contacted by, and we don't think it should be restricted to 1 person per party plus an independent. We think it should be
Councillor,
members.
please, there's other members waiting to get on. You have gone over your
Thank
time.
you.
Okay, have you got a seconder for that amendment? Thank you. Christopher?
I've got another amendment, so I'll wait until we've finished this one, but just.
Well, just check this one
Well,
first.
in relation to this amendment, we've no issue with it.
Okay. Does anybody else want to speak at the moment? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. And can I start by thanking Councillor Harkin for bringing that motion forward? And I also want to thank you for organizing the Civic Forum meeting the other day, because I think that meeting really did underscore the importance of this topic. And I have to commend everyone for speaking about these issues. Seriously, recently, Councillor Tierney told us that he has lost count of the numerous times that this chamber has brought motions on housing, and this just underscores the seriousness of this issue within our communities. I did bring a motion about the empty home strategy, so I will be speaking specifically about that issue today. And I want to welcome the Minister's response to the Assembly question submitted by my colleague Mark H. Duncan, stating that the intention for the strategy is to make the best use of existing assets and include consideration of actions around housing, led generation and use of existing buildings to generate additional supply. Well, we've heard that there is about 6,000 people on the waiting list, and many recognized as homeless in our city and district. The existence of 1,500 vacant houses that could be utilized to elevate housing pressures is a matter of concern. The SDLP welcomes the Minister's confirmation that he is currently reviewing the empty home strategy and considering options for progressing it. However, Mayor, if we have a strategy that is not accompanied by resources, it will not be effective. And I completely agree, we should have 1,000 houses built, but we need resources to accompany that strategy in order to deliver those houses. So I would support the motion and the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I've no no other indicated speakers. So I'm going to take a vote on the amendment. Do I take it we have a unanimous? Yeah, no dissent. Okay. So I'm going to go to you now, Christopher, if you want to add your amendment.
I sent an amendment to Teresa and it's on screen.
Alderman Hussey, just to let you know, Councillor Jackson was first, and I'll come to you then with, I believe you have an amendment too as well. Okay, thank you.
It's just like Councillor Jackson, I have an amendment, but if there's an amendment there still to be voted on, then you have Christopher's to go to be voted on, then you might have to go to mine to be voted on.
I think that's the process. Christopher, have you a seconder for that, please? Sandra, thank you. Christopher, go ahead.
No, thanks, Mayor, and thanks for Councillor Harkin for bringing the motion. And the amendment doesn't take away from any of the actions coming from it, but I do feel that the original motion doesn't take into consideration the biggest transformation in the housing executive in a generation that was announced by the previous Department of Communities Minister, Deirdre Argy. And there was a specific focus on the Northwest and the housing crisis that we're experiencing. It isn't a hidden housing crisis. The vast majority of people within this chamber are working on housing issues day and daily. We don't need to hear from people that are working in housing support services. They recognise that housing is one of the biggest issues that people are facing in the city and district. And again, that's replicated right across the island. And I think Councillor Harkin acknowledged that since the direction from the previous DFC minister, there has been an increase in housing applications that have been coming. And I think we have to acknowledge that we as a council have a role as well. It would have been nice for the proposer of the motion to be involved in the work the council's doing when we're developing our local development plan, when we're trying to facilitate housing through our planning committee. And I know there was a previous member of the proposers party who tried to block an £8 million investment to redevelop a site in the waterside, and because that site would have removed a hedge that had roosting potential for birds. Now, we have to acknowledge that there's a housing crisis. We have to acknowledge that that we have a role as well as council to create or to overcome some of the barriers that exist to deliver homes. There's a huge infrastructure deficit. We know through various council committees, particularly the planning committee, around the pressures in NI water. That's coming continuously whenever we're seeing applications for social housing. There's massive issues in relation to housing land and the availability to deliver.
Councillor, can you just
So
give?
I think in the previous motion, we talked about the role the council can have and how we can work together to try and overcome some of those barriers. And that's the approach we need to take. There's a massive issue, but we have to acknowledge that we've got a responsibility as well as council. We have a role to play and to ensure that there's adequate housing for the many people that are sitting on waiting lists within the city and district.
Thank you. I don't have any indicated speakers on. Oh, right. In a minute, I'll take yourself, Councillor Farrell.
Was it me or?
Sorry, Councillor Farrell, and then.
Mayor,
On the amendment, yes, on this amendment.
I will be very brief, I promise. In terms of the amendment, Councillor Jackson has says that it doesn't take away anything from the motion. Councillor Jackson says it doesn't take away anything from the motion. It actually does. The reality is that the current housing strategy, the current housing policy, the current level of funding for housing across the north has led to nearly 6,000 people being on a housing list across this city and district. The new figures were released on the 22nd of February. There's now 5,951 people. It's going to reach 6,000 in a couple of months. So I agree with Councillor Harkin's proposal. I agree with the motion, and we are not going to support this amendment. That's it.
Hey, Councillor Harkin.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, I don't support the amendment, and here's why. It doesn't change the actions, but the discussion about who's responsible for the housing crisis is actually very, very important. And that's why I said in the south right now, there's 180,000 empty properties, yet we have migrants and asylum seekers getting attacked in the streets not far from here because they're taking up all the housing. It's a lie. The people who are responsible for the housing crisis in the south, the fact that people can't buy a house, you can't get social housing, is the government. And it is the government here too, because who's to blame? We have to actually say we can't have an escalating housing crisis and no one is responsible. So our housing crisis year on year, despite the great work that we know the housing executive does and housing associations and people who are on the front line, gets worse and worse. So who's responsible? We can't just turn around and blame Derry and Strabane District Council or an individual councillor who voted one way on a particular issue. That doesn't actually get to the heart of it. We have to be able to say to people who are asking, why can't I get a house? Why is there 7,000 people on the list? Why is there 50,000 people? Why is somebody getting ahead of me when I've had the top points? We have to be able to say it is someone, and the entity with responsibility ultimately is not Derry and Strabane District Council. It is the government, and we have to put those demands on the government. And I think keeping in the language about who's responsible is actually very important. It goes back to what Thatcher did with the privatisation of the housing stock, but Stormont also played a role. And this hasn't been turned around. Year on year, the housing crisis gets worse. I think we have to say someone's responsible because someone's ultimately responsible for fixing the problem. And that has to be led by government.
Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you, Mayor for Linton. I like the previous two speakers won't be supporting this amendment. And I think that this is a classic strategy of avoiding the root causes of what the contents of the motion is trying to address. And I think this is another classic example of smoke and mirrors, avoiding responsibility, but taking credit for everything. Thank you, Mayor.
Sandra?
Mayor, thank you for allowing me in, and I'm going to declare an interest as somebody who does work in the homeless sector, somebody who is responsible for providing services, for developing services for homeless people. And I'm going to just comment on one aspect of this proposal, and it's in terms of the increasing number of houses being turned into HMOs, guest houses, bed and breakfast and Airbnbs, compounding the housing crisis. That is factually incorrect. And as a motion, how can you support a motion that is factually incorrect? I work in services in this city, and we have over 100 people at the minute, homeless people, very vulnerable homeless people who are currently in B&B guest house accommodation. We have significant student population that are in HMOs. We HMOs, B&Bs at this point in time are solutions to where we're at. They're not the ideal solutions in terms of B&Bs and guest houses for people who are vulnerable and homeless, but without those solutions at the minute, we would have a very significant rough sleeping problem within our city and district. And I don't think any of us want to see that. So in terms of the motion that's brought forward, Councillor Harkin talks about raising the alarm, and in terms of migrants and immigrants being blamed for things across the border. But let me tell you this, what is happening here in our city is very vulnerable homeless people are being scapegoated. Very vulnerable homeless people are being blamed for things that go on in this city. And that is dangerous. And the language that you use in this motion is actually dangerous in terms of bringing that to the fore again, Councillor Harkin. And you were at a task force where we discussed this, and you heard in terms of the issues that we are facing. And sometimes a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. And that's all I want to say.
Okay, I have no more indicated speakers on the amendment. So there is a dissent, so I'm going to ask John to take a vote.
Thank you, Mayor. So on the amendment, Alderman Cook,
Abstain, John.
Alderman Guy,
Abstain.
Alderman Hussey,
Abstain.
Alderman Carrigan,
Abstain, John.
Alderman McMorris,
Abstain.
Alderman Middleton,
Abstain?
Alderman Montgomery,
Abstain.
Alderman Wilkinson,
Abstain.
Councillor Lillian Barr,
Against.
Councillor Raymond Barr, Councillor Boggs,
John.
didn't hear him.
Okay.
Councillor
Ta-
sorry.
Sorry, John.
Councillor Boyle,
Against.
Councillor Clark,
Aye.
Councillor Cusick,
Against.
Councillor Deany,
Aye.
Councillor Devine,
Aye.
Councillor Alex Duffy,
Ah.
Councillor Sandra Duffy, Councillor Farrell,
Against.
Councillor Fleming,
Ah.
Councillor Gallagher,
Against.
Councillor Harkin,
Against.
Councillor Hart, Councillor Heaney, Councillor Hutton, Councillor Jackson, Councillor Leonard, Councillor Logue,
Four.
Councillor McDade, Councillor McGinley,
Aye.
Councillor McHugh, Councillor Mooney,
Against.
Councillor Murphy, Councillor Norris,
Against.
Councillor O'Farrell, Councillor Riley,
Against.
Councillor Tierney, Councillor Neelis. Thank you. Mayor, I've recorded 17 for, 12 against, and 8 abstentions, so the amendment passes.
Okay. Thank you. And now I'm going to go over to Alderman Hussey for another amendment.
I've given my suggest an amendment, which would be the third bullet point. And it reads, and it follows on indeed from the previous motion, to take action to address the blight of derelict houses across the district, seeking to bring these back to a state of fitness for habitation where possible or replacement. Second. Okay. I don't know if I've a seconder.
Okay, yes, I'm looking for a seconder. Right, okay. Alderman
Thank you, Mayor. Just to address it, I'll be as brief as I possibly can. The previous motion, we had this sort of discussion, and I suppose this in reality.
Folks,
is
there's
the-
somebody speaking. Can we please?
This in reality is the amendment which was not acceptable in the previous motion, but could be acceptable in this particular motion. And I think it also, with regard to derelict housing, does address the issue across the district, particularly with regard to rural housing. And Councillor Jackson has referred to planning issues there, and we know the issues that can occur within planning when we talk in terms of bringing derelict housing back into occupation. So it's just to bring that element into the overall concept of the motion. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Farrell, go ahead.
Yeah, just a point of clarity. It says that to take action to address the blight of derelict houses. Could Alderman Hussey just provide some clarity in terms of who would take that action? Is it this council or is it a Stormont department?
Sorry, through you, Mayor. We haven't written this up right. Just give us a wee second there. It should be.
Coming in as it does under the third bullet point, it's to council right to Department of Communities. So it's following on the other bullet points.
Yeah, that's going to be corrected now, Alderman.
So Mayor, just while Teresa's doing that, the action is the council will write to the Department for Communities at the bottom of the first page there. And there's first bullet point is the immediate multi-year building of at least 1,000 social houses. Second bullet points to take immediate action. Third bullet point and fourth bullet point. The fourth bullet point is the amendment. So the amendment is to include it in a letter.
Is that okay now, clear enough, Councillor Farrell? I'm going over to Christopher now. Thank you.
I'll be brief. It's just that we've no issue with the amendment. Given, I think following the transfer of the planning functions, I think it would have made sense for regeneration players to be transferred to council as well. But that hadn't happened, and I know there's a lobby. Particularly within Nilga, for regeneration players to be transferred to councils. But until that happens, it is the department that have the responsibility for regeneration. And if they contain that within a letter is only proper. So we've no issue with that, with the amendment in front of us. Thanks, Mayor.
Folks, I have no other indicated speakers on that amendment, and I haven't heard any dissent, so I am taking it as read. Okay, so Councillor Harkin, I'm now going back to you to sum up. Sorry. I just missed what's right in front of me, so I'm so sorry. If you could just, 1 wee minute, Councillor Harkin, go ahead, Alderman Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mayor, for letting me on. I just like to say fully agree with the motion on hand and the amendments as well. Just took off whatever I had down here as well. Yeah. So it's just kind of stating on the housing and the issues within the rural and the district level and the need of a repair. Will it be restored? The housing level with the housing crisis. And as I just said, I just wanted to concur with everything else, everybody else speaking, and I'll agree with the amendment. Thanks.
And apologies again. So just to reiterate, that was unanimous. So I'm going to go back now to Councillor Harkin for summing up.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, look, I think that the key issue about this debate is that we have an escalating housing crisis. And I think that it makes no sense to me to try and absolve the sorbent executive for its role over the last 3 decades in failing to have a strategy to build enough houses. And even with us in recent years raising the alarm across this district, the number of people on the housing waiting list goes up and up and up. And I think that even with not building enough houses, there are other issues that are compounding the crisis. The fact that Ulster University needs a lot more beds now for students can contribute to private rents going up because there's fewer and fewer available houses for people to rent at an affordable price, which pushes more people onto the housing waiting list. So there's a whole set of issues around housing that go back to the fact that we don't have enough houses, because that's at the heart of this. I don't think Ulster University has a strategy for actually building student accommodation in an immediate sense, and they're throwing out encouragement to individual HMO building with no thought about how that's going to impact the affordable rental market or even the availability of social housing for the housing executive to do temporary accommodation for people. So I'm well aware of how the housing executive uses temporary accommodation now. They're desperate for it. It's non-standard, they tell us, but it's no solution. It's not a long-term solution. So at the heart of this has to be the Stormont executive taking responsibility for building more social houses across the north and to make sure that there's affordable housing for all that need it. And if we don't deal with that crisis, it's going to escalate and we're going to have a multi-layered growing problem across society as people put the blame somewhere because people want solutions, and those solutions right now are house building, and it has to be funded. And I think that we have to make sure that it's an urgent issue.
Okay, thank you. Again, I don't see any dissent for the substantive motion, so we'll just take it that it's passed. Okay. Folks, the next 5 items are for information. Item 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, responses to motion, resolution, smaller councils, correspondence, sealing list, and any other relevant items. If anybody wants to come in on that, can they please, any of those, can they indicate now what they want to come in on? Other than that, I'm going to close the meeting. Nobody? Meeting closed. Thank you, folks.